Number 5. The Borley Rectory. The Borley Rectory is an old London estate that has the unique distinction of being considered the most haunted building in the United Kingdom. No big deal or anything. Almost immediately after its constructions, the stories of hauntings started to come out. A local legend says that in the 12th century, a priest and a nun had an affair, and when they were discovered, the nun was bricked up and left to rot in the nearby church. And since then, there's been all manner of legend about her spirit roaming, seemingly in the halls of the rectory. The film The Nun could possibly be based on this. In 1900, the 4 daughters of the estate owner all said they saw a nun wandering around the estate at night. When they tried to speak to her, they got no response. The family had repeatedly claimed they'd seen this nun around their property, and at one occasion, what they thought was the spectral apparition of a horse-drawn carriage with a headless rider. From there on, there was constant reportings of bizarre sounds, strange shadows. In 1927, the original family owning the estate had all passed, and a new family moved in and immediately started experiencing hauntings all the same. The new family, the Smiths, discovered a human skull in the cupboard in a brown bag shortly after unpacking. They reported poltergeist behavior like unexplained footsteps, lights flickering around them, and the same sightings of headless specters. After only 2 years, the Smith family left the rectory, unable to deal with the hauntings present. The next family, the Foysters, experienced, well, wouldn't you know it, all the same things. Objects flying around their home, and on one occasion, claimed that their daughter was attacked by something horrible. They swiftly moved out as well, and the last owner of the rectory would be Captain Gregson, who accidentally lit the estate ablaze while unpacking, knocking over a lantern. Although an insurance report claims that they think the fire was started intentionally, perhaps in a desperate attempt to cast away whatever evil remains in the Borley Rectory, or maybe he unleashed it onto the world. Now my friends, if you want to hear more scary stories about haunted houses and just about everything else under the sun, we're the place to be. Subscribe and creep on creeping on. Number 4. Roland Doe. Now the story of Roland Doe is fairly notable as far as famous exorcisms go, mainly because Roland Doe's case served as the inspiration for the legendary horror film The Exorcist. Roland Doe, a name for the anonymous boy, lived a quiet life in Maryland. He was the family's only son and didn't have much in the way of friends while growing up, save for his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist and lover of the occult. When Roland was young, she gifted him a Ouija board and taught him how to use it. Now in 1949, dear old Aunt Harriet would pass away, devastating Roland and the family. After her passing, the family started to experience strange, inexplicable occurrences around the home. Scratching would come from inside the walls, water would be leaking out of all the pipes, and curiously, Roland's bed would be moved around in the middle of the night. Confused, the family sought out the experts of everyone they knew, and their local minister suggested they needed the help of an exorcist. Priests came to exorcise the home and Roland, believing that the boy had been possessed by the devil. They strapped him to a mattress to begin, but had to stop when he broke the straps and slashed one of the clergymen with the strap. Red scratches appeared all over his body, reading out the word Louis. The family believed this was a sign they needed to move to St. Louis, where the family had relatives. From there, they were put into contact with a series of priests who would conduct round-the-clock exorcisms on Roland. The days would pass normally, but at night, the battle would begin when Roland would enter a trance-like state, speaking in Latin, gutturally growling, even threatening priests that Satan had taken him. For weeks, the priests toiled tirelessly to exorcise the demon, until eventually there was a miracle breakthrough. The priests called upon the power of St. Michael and told the demon he was coming to battle them. Roland woke the next morning and said he had a vision of Satan and St. Michael on a heavenly battlefield, fighting for control of his soul, and that he knew Satan was gone. From here, Roland lived a happy, healthy, normal life, and his case might have been forgotten if author William Blatty wasn't inspired by the case after reading a story about it in the paper. But without him, we never would have got The Exorcist, so it all worked out, mostly. Number 3. The Crescent Hotel. Now the Crescent Hotel is a beautiful stop if you're ever visiting Arkansas. It's been called the Grand Old Lady of the Ozarks due to its gorgeous old Gothic design and wonderful view of the mountains. What a shame that such a beautiful spot is said to be home to tortured souls unable to move on. During construction of the Crescent Hotel, a worker named Michael plunged from the death, fatally landing in room 218. The room has since been a hotspot for paranormal activity, with bizarre noises and laughter reportedly heard by the guests. But this wouldn't be the only haunting present at the Crescent Hotel. You see, before it found life as a hotel resort and a spa, the Crescent Hotel was run by a charismatic charlatan named Norman Baker, who ran an alternative clinic out of the hotel, claiming the spring waters had restorative powers and could cure any ailments. Of course, Baker didn't even have the slightest medical experience or training and was far closer to a two-bit con man than he was a doctor. Patients would check in and never leave. Baker would promise patients a cure for everything up to cancer, when in reality he was just injecting them with corn silk and water. Baker was arrested for his crimes in 1949, but the souls of those he tormented wouldn't find peace yet. All throughout the hotel, guests report strange noises, scratchings, whisperings, with some going so far as to say they see ghastly figures, floating orbs and such. There's even a notable ghost who wanders the halls. A nurse named Theodora is the hotel's most prominent ghost, who manifests as an old woman flustered out of room 14. She hates mess and discord, and many guests report that they'll discover their belongings have been rearranged if they're staying in her room. There's even sightings of a ghost cat named Morris, who luckily is a benevolent spirit. Guests report hearing purring or feeling a mysterious warm brushing against their legs. I just hope there's meow mix in the afterlife. Number 2. The Winchester House. William Winchester was the heir to the Winchester rifle throne, and married to his wife Sarah, they lived happily. They welcomed a daughter, although tragically she fell ill immediately and passed before her first birthday. Shortly after, William would pass as well, leaving Sarah alone, depressed, and with roughly $20 million kicking around. In 1886, Sarah used the money to move from Connecticut to California and began construction on her legacy, her mansion. It was built for 20 years. She paid workers night and day round the clock, demolishing one improvement to make another. But the house wasn't built like any other house. It seemed random, like it was being built out of a dream. A staircase that goes nowhere, ending at the ceiling. Multiple boarded up rooms. She spent roughly $5 million on the construction of the odd home. But why? Did she just want something to start conversations when dinner guests were over? Well, shortly after her family tragedies, Sarah visited a psychic for advice, who told her she was being cursed by the spirits of all the lives taken by her husband's rifles. That is a lot of angry cowboys. She was told she needed to build a mansion to capture the wandering souls and seal them away from the rest of the world, and she made it her life's mission to accomplish this. She thought that the house's bizarre design would confuse spirits and keep them at bay. I honestly don't know about that. I thought ghosts could float and go through walls. I don't even know if they would care. The house still stands and is a popular tourist spot for fledgling ghost hunters, who believe that her massive ghost trap did work and she's caught spirits, with reportings of mysterious sounds. There are some who even claim that Sarah herself has been trapped in her home, doomed to walk amongst the spirits she worked so hard to capture. Number 1. The Bell Witch. In the 1800s, a farmer named John Bell moved his family to Adams, Tennessee, onto a bountiful 300-acre farm. Bell quickly became a figurehead of the community, respected by many, and becoming a local leader at his town's church. For the Bell family, things were the brightest they've ever been. They were living the dream. But things wouldn't be good for long, and they'd find themselves in a nightmare. By 1817, strange things started to occur around the farmstead. John found a mysterious animal, a mutant hybrid that resembled a grotesque mix between a dog and a rabbit. The Bell children would complain to their father that they would hear strange sounds that sounded like vermin gnawing at all things in their bedrooms, and the children would wake up with scratches all over their bodies. At all hours of the day, everyone in the family would complain that they could hear faint whispering and singing, and that it sounded like an old woman was singing hymns on their wall. Most tragically, the Bells found a mysterious vial of liquid inside their home that no one could understand. Nervous about what it was, John Bell offered a small amount of it to their cat, who passed almost immediately after. For 3 long years, the Bell family was tormented by these strange occurrences, chalking it up to a mysterious entity that would later be known as the Bell Witch, named after the mysterious old humming that they kept hearing. In 1820, John Bell grew extremely ill, quickly descending in health and passing. At his funeral, the mourners complained that all they could hear was the laughing of an old woman, mocking and singing at the late John Bell. The farm was so notable that it even caught the attention of President Andrew Jackson, who in 1819, a year before John Bell's passing, visited it to see if the legends of the witch were true. Allegedly, as soon as his carriage arrived at the property, the horses refused to budge anymore. The animals can always tell.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Perron family. It's January 1971. A large farmhouse sits in Harrisville, Rhode Island. The Perron family, Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters move into what they thought would be their dream home. One night the family notices strange occurrences happening. A couple of strange noises as if they hear things moving on their own, couple chairs. From the first night to the first week, right away though, the incidents got worse over time. It started with a missing broom at first, but then resulted in a paranormal nightmare, to say the least. In researching the home, Carolyn discovered that the same family had owned it for 8 generations previous to them, during which time many had died by either drowning, murder, or even hanging. Paranormal investigator team Ed and Lorraine Warren, the New England demonologists, were brought in. This is where it gets haunting. After a walk about the property, they claimed that the home was haunted by a demon named Bathsheba. In fact, a woman named Bathsheba Sherman had lived on the property in the 1800s. Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the home, and she resented the new homeowners. According to Andrea Perron, one of the daughters, who remembers the night vividly, says the family encountered several spirits in the house that caused them turmoil. Beds levitating in the middle of the night, tall ghostly shadows, and even their bedrooms reeking of rotten meat. Ew. The family avoided going into the basement at all because of a cold, deathly presence. Basements, man, always. The things that went on there were so incredibly frightening. Quote from Lorraine herself. The Warrens made frequent trips to the house over the years, and the Perron family lived there. They performed a seance that had Carolyn Perron speaking in tongues before she was allegedly thrown across the room by a spirit. The Warrens made frequent trips to the house, but Lorraine insisted that she and her husband would never ever try an exorcism, which must be performed, of course, by a Catholic priest, due to its dangers. The seances apparently allegedly caused Carolyn Perron to be temporarily possessed one time, which Andrea, their daughter, claims she watched unknowingly from the top of the stairs. Shaken by the seances and concerned for his wife's mental health, Roger Perron asked the Warrens to leave and stop investigating the house, since it was making things even worse. According to Andrea Perron, the family finally gave in and moved out of the house in 1980. Luckily for them, the presence did not follow them. Number 4, the Snedeker House. In 1986, Ed and Lorraine Warren were on the scene yet again. We know these two. They're the superhero duo and couple that have literally riddled this planet most of its dark forces. They arrived and proclaimed the Snedeker House, a former funeral home, to be absolutely infested with demons. The Haunting in Connecticut, a film very loosely based on the Warrens' versions of events, was released in 2009. In 1986, Carmen and Al Snedeker moved to a small town of Southington, Connecticut, with the purpose of being closer to the hospital at which their oldest son had been treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was while they were moving in that Al made a startling discovery. In the basements again, in particular, the room that was completely embalmed with tables and tools. Okay. The house, it turned out, used to be a funeral home. Oof. Not long after, Carmen says she began experiencing strange phenomena like items disappearing, and her children reported seeing strange people in the house, as well as hearing voices and the sounds of hundreds of birds taking flight. Her oldest, who at the time was in the middle of radiation treatment, began to exhibit radical personality shifts, becoming animalistic and angry. Mop water was reported to turn to blood red, and the sense of rotting flesh and decay were reported all throughout the home. She was also frightened of apparitions that she saw one night with long black hair and black eyes, and the other with white hair and white eyes wearing a pinstripe tuxedo. It was then that Carmen decided to contact Ed and Lorraine, along with a few other investigators. The Warrens moved into the house until they'd experienced this presence the Snedekers were talking about. During their time in the house, they claimed to have seen first-hand demons in the home, with many team members being slapped and beaten and even slammed to the floor. The Warrens deemed it necessary for a full-scale exorcism, after which the house was judged clear by the Warrens themselves. And a peaceful aura then seemed to linger instead of this once cold, dark presence. I mean, it's a funeral home, you know, right off the bat. That's a no-no for me. Number 3, the Smurl haunting. The Smurls moved into their dream home in West Piston, Pennsylvania, August 1973. They claimed that the premises were disturbed by a demon that caused loud noises and bad odors, eventually even throwing their dog into a wall, shaking their mattresses, pushing their daughters down a flight of stairs, and then physically assaulting some family members on several occasions. In 1986, the family had had enough and brought in the pair of demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren. According to Ed Warren, the demon that inhabited the Smurls' home was very powerful, shaking mirrors off the walls, moving furniture of course about the room after they tried to persuade it to leave by playing religious hymns and praying. The Warrens claimed that when a drastic temperature drop happened, a tall dark mass formed in the home, and the demon left a message on the mirror telling them to, quote, get out. After months of investigation, the Warrens alleged that they had a number of audio tapes containing knocking and movement sounds made by the demon. Spokespeople for the Roman Catholic Church said that the home was blessed by several priests who said that they saw no harmful activity. The Smurls, however, claimed a priest performed 3 unsuccessful exorcisms and that the demon avoided the rites by moving between the floors of the home. That same year, the pastor of Immaculate Conception Parish in West Piston said the Smurls felt that after intense prayers, things were finally back to normal. After the Smurl family moved, the next family never encountered anything supernatural while living there. Hoax or haunting? What do you think? Number 2, Amityville. The Warrens are best known for their involvement in the 1975 Amityville horror investigation. New York couple George and Kathleen Lutz claimed that their house was haunted by a violent demonic presence so intense that it eventually drove them out of their home with mental health problems. The reported haunting was the basis for the 1977 book and adapted into the 1979 and 2005 films of the same name, while also serving as inspiration for the film series that followed. Though their investigations remain intriguing, the Amityville horror case was Ed and Lorraine Warren's claim to fame. In November 1974, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest child of the DeFeo family, murdered his entire family, including all of his siblings, in their beds with a .35 caliber rifle. Ugh. The infamous case became the catalyst for the claim that demons and spirits haunted the Amityville house. In 1976, George and Kathy Lutz and their 2 sons moved into the Long Island home and soon believed a demonic spirit was residing there with them. George said that he witnessed his wife transforming into a 90-year-old woman and then levitating above their bed late at night. They even claimed to see slime seeping out of their walls and a pig-like creature running around their house. Even more unsettling, knives flew off the counters, pointing right at family members. It got so violent and unpredictable that the family walked around the house with a crucifix, reciting the Lord's prayers around their neck. On their final night there, they say banging as loud as a marching band was coming from the house. 28 days after being in the house, they had to leave. Yeah, no doubt. Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the home, and according to the Warrens, Ed was thrown to the floor and Lorraine felt an overwhelming demonic presence. Along with their research team, they claim to have captured a picture of a spirit in the form of a little boy on the stairway. The story became so infamous the couple passed a lie detector test with flying colors. That's terrifying. Their son, Daniel, admits that he still has nightmares about the horrifying things that he experienced in the house growing up. Yeah, gruesome stuff. I won't spoil Act 3, but it gets dark and bloody. Speaking of gruesome, and our number 1 spot, Michael Taylor. It's 1974, Yorkshire, England. Michael Taylor, age 31, father of 5 and husband to Christine Taylor. Michael was a well-mannered and caring father and husband. Michael, like anyone, became depressed from a back injury and left him short on work and oddly off. After seeking religious advice and one-on-one sessions at a local church, Michael started having outbursts and acting aggressively. Puzzled, of course, he sought one-on-one sessions which turned ugly very soon. After apparently changing form and attacking Marie, a young religious leader helping Taylor, and unable to remember anything, Michael and the church agreed that an exorcism was necessary. Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith met at St. Thomas and started. It got so violent, he was even tied to the church floor. After hours in the middle of the night, the two had managed to exorcise more than 40 demons out of Michael, in which they had appeared around them as they exited. Violence continued, leaving only 3 remaining for the next day. After returning home from the first session, Michael was found now hours later, naked, in the middle of the street, covered head to toe in blood. Michael apparently had returned home, which then his wife and family dog lay dead as the police arrived in the AM. He was arrested soon after for the death of his wife. Michael had this to say about his late wife in court. Quote, "Released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." He was acquitted on psychological conditions, and the jury found that he had met his breaking point during the exorcism. He was acquitted on insanity and remained in and out of facilities until he passed in 2013.
Number 5 on this list is the dancing plague of 1518. That's right, guys, you heard that right. A plague about dancing. Honestly, I'd never heard of this before, and in my whole time working on this channel
This is actually the coolest and strangest thing that I've ever come across. So in Strasbourg, Alsace, which is now modern day France, in the year 1518, from July all the way to September, people just started dancing. For months, hundreds of people were dancing in the streets of France and they couldn't stop. It's said that one woman started dancing in the streets one day and then some more came and they just kept going for months with absolutely no reason at all. People started thinking that this was the cause of a demonic possession or some ghost that was making people lose their minds, but in actuality, nobody had any idea why these people were doing this. This wasn't a casual waltz either. These people were going hard. These people went so hard that they literally danced themselves to death. I can't possibly imagine going so hard at the club that I died, but that's basically what happened here with these people. There are actual claims that at one point in the heat of all this dancing, up to 15 people were dying per day just from dancing. This death kept happening and these people would continue dancing around all of these bodies. This plague went on until September when it just suddenly subsided and that was that. No explanation, no reasoning behind it, they just went hard for several months and then stopped. That's why everyone thinks that something demonic has to be the cause of all this. Some people have speculated that food poisoning may have played some role, but that just doesn't make any sense to me because it went on for months. Seriously folks, please comment down below what you think about this or some theories about why this happened because it has me pretty baffled. Number 4 on this list is the lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis is a city that is considered to be a utopian society in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was first documented by Plato in 2 of his works, Timaeus and Critias. Now even though Atlantis is often referred to as a city these days, back then Plato described it as an island. This island was located in the Atlantic and was said to be pretty massive, bigger than Asia Minor and Libya combined. This island, or city, was extremely wealthy and had a surplus of resources. This is what led them to being considered a utopia and a highly advanced group. Now Plato describes a great battle between these Atlanteans and the Athenians and says that after lots of hard fighting, the Athenians eventually prevailed in the war. Then several massive earthquakes caused the earth to shift and the entire island of Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea and now rests at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. Many people have speculated on how accurate these tales from Plato are, with experts believing that this could just all be a myth. However, the legend of Atlantis started to circulate around Europe many years later and people began searching for this lost city. Nobody has found it to this day, but that doesn't mean that it never existed. Maybe we're just thinking about it the wrong way. Some people have thought that this entire city of Atlantis could have been aliens coming down to Earth and that potentially this island was never really an island to begin with. Plato does describe the society as being a utopia, and an explanation for that would be aliens that have far better technology than we do. Maybe when this island apparently disappeared, these aliens just left. Now that does beg the question, if they're so advanced, how on earth could the ancient Athenians beat them in a battle? Which I do think is a very fair point. I do believe that Plato and the people after him have exaggerated this story, and the full truth has probably been lost in history. But I also believe that this tale didn't just come out of nowhere, and something potentially paranormal could be at hand. Number 3 on this list is the Coral Castle. The Coral Castle is a limestone structure located in Florida. It is super unique and has these strange limestone rocks that have been carved into various figures. Now there's nothing inherently cursed about this place. However, similar to the pyramids or Stonehenge that we covered in our last video, people wonder how on earth this place was made. Edward Leeds Scallon was a self-taught Russian engineer who came to America. He lived from 1887 to 1951 and is credited with being the creator of the Coral Castle. What's absolutely crazy about this story though, is he constructed the structure all by himself. This is what baffles people to this day. How on earth is it possible that one man in the early 1900s was capable of moving these limestones and carving them the way that they are single-handedly? These stones weigh thousands of pounds and there's no way that a man would ever be able to lift these things with sheer strength. Now he was an engineer and people have speculated that it was potentially the use of magnetism, something that he was fascinated with in his life. When asked how he was able to do this, he replied, "I understand the laws of weight and leverage and I know the secrets of the people who built the pyramids." This kind of makes sense, but with the pyramids they had thousands of people working on them all at once. You were only one man. People have theorized that Edward actually had some supernatural abilities that he was hiding from the public. This could honestly be believable because his personality was apparently extremely eccentric and very strange. However Edward was able to construct the Coral Castle, It truly is remarkable. Number 2 on this list is the oldest ghost story of all time. Ever wonder when all this started? When did humans start believing in ghosts, or when did we have our first encounter with a poltergeist? Well, a 3,500-year-old tablet may have the earliest depiction of a ghost as we know them today. This is a small tablet that was made in ancient Babylon and is considered by some experts to be one of the first, if not the first, written depiction of a ghost. The ghostly drawings could be easily missed, and you have to really pay attention if you're going to see it. An expert on the subject, Irvin Finkel, says, "You'd probably never give it a second thought because the area where the drawings are looks like it's got no writing, but when you examine it and hold it under a lamp, those figures leap out at you across time in the most startling way." The tablet goes into detail on how to get rid of ghosts and calls for an exorcist. It explains how this exorcist must make figurines of a man and a woman, and also speak the words of Mesopotamian god Shemesh to get rid of the ghost. There's also a warning to the reader to not turn around, potentially an indicator that a ghost could be behind you, or you could risk getting sucked into the underworld if your focus isn't steady. This tablet also lists a bunch of materials that can be used in rituals and that can be used to prevent ghosts from appearing in the first place. This is super interesting because it means that ghosts and spirits visiting the living can be traced all the way back to the ancient Mesopotamians. We were having paranormal events happen to us thousands of years ago, and the action of exorcising demons and ghosts, it all started with these guys. One could argue that they were the founders and innovators of a lot of our ghostly practices and knowledge to this day. Number 1 on this list is Oak Island. Oak Island is a very mysterious island that has been shrouded in lore for years. It's a privately owned island off the south shore of Nova Scotia, Canada. It has so many rumors surrounding it that it's even got its own television show called The Curse of Oak Island that has 8 seasons under its belt. This is a reality television show by the History Channel where they explore the mysteries of Oak Island, and considering they're on season 8, it's fair to say that there have been quite a few mysteries. The one that's gained the most international fame, though, is the Money Pit. The Money Pit is supposedly a place on Oak Island where there's a plethora of buried treasure waiting for somebody to dig it up. This treasure was left by the pirate Captain William Kidd, who lived from 1645 to 1701. There's said to be vast riches here, however no one's been able to find it up until this point. This is largely because finding buried treasure can be extremely difficult, but also due to the curse that surrounds it. The curse that hovers over this treasure states that 7 men will die in search of the treasure before it's found. To this day, there have actually been 6 deaths associated with this buried treasure. That means that if one more person was to die whilst they're looking for it, then the treasure would either reveal itself, or the next person who goes looking for it would be the one who finds it. Problem with this is that there's one more person who needs to die, and I don't think that anyone wants to be that unlucky number 7. Other than this pirate treasure, there's also rumored to be some extremely valuable and mystical items here. Never before seen Shakespearean plays, the Holy Grail, and the Ark of the Covenant have all been linked to Oak Island. If searching for cursed treasure is your cup of tea, and this is definitely the place for you.
Number 5, the South Shields Poltergeist. Coming up first on this list is going to be the story of the South Shields Poltergeist, a recent case of spiritual harassment. I love a contemporary ghost. We got too many ghosts from the Victorian era or like the 1800s. We don't get nearly enough modern 2000s hauntings. Anyway, in 2005, an anonymous couple living in England had begun reporting seeing strange things happening around the house. Their furniture would be dragged along the ground, which is odd, but stranger things have happened. Doors left open, again, bizarre. But it was when they'd come home and found the chairs stacked on top of each other, they began to suspect that something odd was happening. One evening, the couple was asleep, and the wife had been struck in the back of the head with a doll, one of her son's toys. When she sat upright, she found herself being pelted by an onslaught of toys thrown across the room, as if G.I. Joe himself was leading the offensive. Dolls and blocks thrown at them from the hallway. They tried to cover themselves up with the comforter, but found that whatever entity that had taken up residence in their home had other ideas, and they found themselves pulling back at this invisible force. This horrifying encounter would culminate in the husband waking up and discovering 13 clean red cuts all over his skin, and a burning, searing pain on his back. That same morning, the couple discovered a rocking horse that had been hung from the ceiling, a stuffed rabbit toy sitting at the top of the stairs with a box cutter left between its hands, unsettling things written on the walls. You know, stuff like go die or you're dead. Very clear cut. I gotta say, this poltergeist really has a flair for the dramatic, setting the scene like this. That's good environmental storytelling with that set dressing. Anyway, enough was enough, and after having lived through enough activity to feel the brunt of one of the bad Conjuring sequels, they contacted a paranormal investigator. These investigators claimed that they made contact with an evil entity that looked like a pure black void that radiated pure evil. Shortly after the investigation crew showed up, however, the haunting seemed to stop. Guess the ghosts got scared when somebody stepped to them. The couple has now gone on to live a normal, happy life, although they claim they have been traumatized by the events. I know I would probably never look at that stuffed rabbit the same way again. And my ghouls and goblins, if you're looking for more good content from us, well, hey, we've got loads and loads of that. We got ghosts, ghouls, aliens, government cover-ups, SCPs, and just about everything freaky under the sun. Let's keep going. Number 4, Kate Morgan. Our next entry is about the mystery of Kate Morgan, whose death has been a long unsolved mystery in American history. In 1888, the Hotel del Coronado opened in Coronado, California, just across from San Diego. It was as classy as a joint in the late 1880s could be, and upon its completion, it was the largest resort hotel in the world. Our story, though, doesn't start until 1892, when a young woman named Kate Morgan checked into the hotel, room 304. She had told the desk she was there to meet with her brother, who was a doctor who was treating her for stomach cancer. However, tragically, 5 days after first checking in, Miss Morgan was found dead on the steps of the hotel of what looked to be a self-inflicted gunshot. Now, it would later come out after her death that for whatever reason, the story she had told the staff was all untrue, with an investigation suggesting maybe Morgan had been a con artist. What we did know about her is that she'd been married to a postal worker from Nebraska named Tom Morgan, and that Kate was believed to be visiting San Diego to visit her brother, who was a gambler, not a doctor. But, you know, they probably pulled in similar amounts of money. Doctors didn't even think that Morgan's gunshot wound was self-inflicted, as the bullet retrieved from the autopsy hadn't come from a gun Kate had owned. However, the case was never opened. It was officially declared that she took her own life, and that was that. It would seem that Kate Morgan, much like us, is unable to move on from this case, as she's said to still inhabit the Del Coronado to this very day around her former room, which has now been renamed room 3327. Guests report hearing all sorts of bizarre sounds: screaming, crying, wailing, laughing, all while staying in the room, reporting erratic and chaotic noises pretty much all hours of the night. Weirdly too, guests claim that while staying in 3327, the temperature of the room will change in bizarre ways, as if there'll be an intense, freezing cold front that lasts for a few short minutes and dissipates, or electronics malfunctioning. And this seems made up, but I did just get a cold, shock while reading through this, so she might be in the room with us recording right now, and if you are, Kate, hope you're doing well. So is Kate's ghost still checked into the hotel, doomed to wander the property until the crime can be solved? We may never know. Number 3, the Black Monk. Our next story is going to take us down to England yet again, this time in lovely Yorkshire. The scene was 1966. The Pritchard family lived quietly and under the radar, certainly expecting no trouble and definitely not expecting to be haunted. They just moved into their new house and were settling in when they started to notice some odd, troubling things, all the usual signs of a paranormal haunting: strange scratches, strange noises at all hours of the night, furniture shifting around. Those sound like the telltale symptoms of a poltergeist to me. They assumed it might just have been something natural because they've never seen a movie in their life, I guess. The mind just never wants to assume it's ghosts. It was as they were approaching a year of living in that new estate that the Pritchards truly became aware of what they had inadvertently welcomed into their lives. It seemed as if whatever entity that was haunting the Pritchard house had a keen interest in the family's younger members, primarily the young student Diane. On one occasion, she claims she felt herself being dragged across the hallway by her neck, and she even showed welts and bruises all over her neck afterwards. A red handprint was burned around her throat. Foregoing subtlety at this point, this is when the entity started to make itself manifest to the family, apparating as a dark-robed, hovering being that would appear at the family's beds during the middle of the night. Very ominous. A paranormal investigation was then called and found to be inconclusive. As soon as the investigators came, the haunting seemed to slow down, similar to what had happened in the South Shields case. Ghosts are just cowards as soon as you tell on them, eh? It seemed the Pritchard family had found peace, but the investigator involved was still bothered and continued to research independently, and discovered that the Pritchard estate was built upon the former grounds of a medieval rectory, and across the street from an old gallows where people used to hang out. After a little digging, he learned that one of the prisoners sentenced to death there was an old monk. The investigator suggested this monk's malevolent spirit was the evil entity that they saw wrapped in black, dubbing him the Black Monk. And from here, the case became a legend, eventually being made into a movie called When the Lights Go Out. Number 2. Esther Cox. Coming up next is going to be the story of Esther Cox and the haunting of Amherst in Nova Scotia. It's a particularly famous Canadian ghost story, eh? It's sometimes referred to as the Great Amherst Mystery, and it's plagued and piqued the curiosity of paranormal enthusiasts for years the world over. In the late 1870s, Esther Cox was living at her sister's house alongside her brother-in-law and their children. At some point during 1878, Esther was attacked by a male friend who had tried to take advantage of her, leading to a rapid decline in Esther's mental health and emotional distress. And shortly thereafter, Esther's condition would be made infinitely worsened by the strange paranormal experiences that began to manifest on the Amherst property. The Cox family would report strange noises all throughout the night, and Esther's body began to swell as she alternated between impossibly high fevers and deathly low chills. And shortly after this was when objects around the house would be reported moving. Oh, that's it. That's the telltale sign of a poltergeist. A little aside, guys, if you ever see your table moving across your living room, call the Ghostbusters right away. The family doctor who was visiting the Cox household claims that he once saw the words, "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill," written on the wall by the headboard. He tried to sedate her, but discovered that it really didn't do much to stop supernatural doings. Stressed and out of options, Esther thought that moving houses might be enough to stop the curse. But sadly, whatever is haunting her had their hooks in deep, as the ghosts would follow Esther through every house she moved to. Evidently, the spirits found this greatly offensive, as one of the houses Esther would move to would burn down while she was staying at it, resulting in Esther's arrest for arson and eventual conviction. Esther pleaded that she was innocent, and even witnesses backed up this, saying that everything Esther had been claiming had occurred as she'd said. But the old "a ghost did it" is an argument that rarely holds up in court, and Esther spent a year inside a cell. She was released in 1879 and would find a husband and raise a few children, seemingly free from the curse that once sought out to destroy her life. And number 1. Honest Abe. Would you believe that one of the most famous and most reported ghosts in American history is none other than the great emancipator himself, Abraham Lincoln? Honestly, Honest Abe gets seen more than just about any other ghost. Since his assassination, there have been numerous sightings of undead Abe wandering through the halls of the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt, of the Beatles fame, kept her study in what was formerly Lincoln's bedroom, pretty much just asking to bump into a ghostly stovepipe hat if you move into his bedroom. Roosevelt claimed that over the years she lived there, she could feel his presence and would sometimes see apparitions of him out of the corner of her eye. And while her husband was president, a number of other sightings would occur. A young clerk claimed that he saw Lincoln's spitting image, clear as day, sitting on the foot of a bed polishing his boots. On a visit from the Netherlands, Queen Wilhelmina claims that when she was spending a night inside the White House, she was visited by Lincoln's ghost knocking on her door. Calvin Coolidge's wife claims to have seen her on more than one occasion as well. First ladies were really out there seeing Lincoln. Claims that she saw him with his arms clasped behind his back, lost in thought looking out into the Potomac River. Wise. Winston Churchill had said that during the Second World War, he felt like he could see Lincoln's ghost coming to when the country needed him the most, and he also shared the most direct encounter and probably the funniest one. Now, Churchill used to love to relax by taking a long hot bath while enjoying a cigar. On one occasion, he says he stepped out of the bath, took a cigar, and walked into his bedroom and saw a man standing in the bedroom already, giving him quite a shock. He said when he saw the man's face, he laughed and said, "Good evening, Mr. President. You have me at a disadvantage." He claims he saw Lincoln chuckle wryly, then disappear. Presidents Truman, Roosevelt, and Hoover have all claimed to have seen inexplicable things around the White House, claiming they were all signs of Lincoln. In the last few decades, however, reportings of sightings of old Abraham Lincoln have calmed significantly. Perhaps he's finally been able to move on, or perhaps he's just very slowly checking out the rest of Washington, D.C. There's a whole lot of tourist spots and monuments to work through, and maybe he just got really caught up on the White House tour. He's got all the time in the world now to check them all out.
Kicking off at number 5, body of a pig. Demon, ghost, spirit. This one's for you to decide, but according to paranormal investigator Devin Raymond, who uploaded this video to his own personal channel way back in 2007, whatever it is has a special message for all of us. Did Did you catch that? Well, first let's talk about the bizarre mystery that surrounds this particular paranormal instance, which was filmed at an undisclosed location during Devin's tenure as resident paranormal expert with an organisation that has since disappeared. In this video, Devin allegedly uses EVP technology, or electronic voice phenomena, a process that purportedly can pick up the audio communications of paranormal entities. Let's listen again. Yeah, what do you think of that? Next up at number 4, the Ghost Girl. Now, there's not a lot to this video other than to show you, because in actuality this is a very brief glimpse from a very short video that nevertheless captured something or someone not of this world. Well, either that or there's small children roaming around abandoned houses out in the deep woods, which is equally as concerning. In 2010, YouTuber Car Records uploaded a short 2-minute clip of 2 friends exploring an abandoned house out in the woods of northern Ukraine when they came across something lurking in the corner that they didn't quite expect. After initially being startled by something not so apparent, the uploader later slowed the video footage down to capture the face of what appears to be a young girl. Now, I get it, a lot of this video is exposition and people have claimed that the girl is just a photograph or a cardboard cutout, but I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure I saw that thing blink. What do you guys think? Coming in at number 3, Ghost in the Kitchen. You may have caught our poltergeist video from earlier this week, but there's one video that stood out as a little bit more unexplainable, shall we say, or explainable depending which way you look at it. Uploaded by YouTuber Je suis un petit pois in 2007, which, if my French is up to scratch, means I am a little pea, which captured footage from 2 days worth of film in Altrincham, Cheshire, at a suspected home under paranormal activity. Let's take a look. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a little bit perplexed by this video. Yeah, I understand that it's an easy encounter to fake, but if we take the exposition into account, and this is the footage of 2 days worth of filming, then things get a little bit weird in that case. What do you guys think? Next up at number 2, something in the desert. Now, I'm not going to lie, this is possibly one of my favourite paranormal videos on the internet, purely for the fact it's completely and utterly mind-bogglingly weird. It's a simple premise: a group of young friends are driving a truck through a desert in Saudi Arabia when they stumble across a strange person, creature, entity. Well, of course they whip out their phones and start filming, because that's exactly what people do in the 21st century. This footage was reportedly caught in the empty quarter desert south of Saudi Arabia, otherwise known as Rub al-Khali, the largest contiguous sand desert on the planet. I mean, it's not too hard to believe that there's something weird, strange, and unexplainable lurking far out there in the desert sands, correct? Let's hope we just never stumble across it. And finally, at our number 1 spot, the Gettysburg Ghosts.
See? Uh-huh. Look. There's nobody there. I can't see. Look.
Slated as the most authentic ghost footage of all time, I want you guys to watch through this whole clip and let me know what you think. It's one of those things that you really have to make your own mind up with, because it's either one or 2 ways, and I prefer not to sway you either one of those ways. But ultimately, this video captured something unexplainable. At least. Filmed by Delia and Tom Underwood way back when in November of 2001 at the site of the infamous Battle of Gettysburg of 1863, widely considered to be a turning point during the American Civil War. The couple allegedly have caught footage of the spirits of the soldiers slain during the battle as they march relentlessly through the woods. Watch the whole thing and you'll see what I'm getting at, and I'll leave it up to you to decide. Next up at number 4, testing the flashlight.
Hard to hold the camera steady and the light steady, and you know, that's why I don't do the long continuous videos, but at least this way you'll get to see how this light performs.
And it's my favourite guy again, the bloke with the largest cojones on the planet, YouTuber exploring abandoned mines and unusual places, aka Frank. who makes it his life's work to delve deep into the unexplored and forgotten places of the planet, crawl around in the dark and provide us with some spine-chilling, potentially paranormal content. Just like the Horton abandoned mine video, this one features some strange, unnerving whispers and sounds that follow Frank as he tries to test out his brand new survival flashlight. Frank takes us to the abandoned Waldeck mine, a 150-year-old former gold mine located deep in the southern Appalachia, and, well, see for yourself.
Sounds like, what, is that wind?
I've said it before and I'll say it again, you are a braver man than me, Frank. Coming in next at number 3, Fallen Angel. And you know, I just had to slip this video in somewhere because for many, this is the first paranormal video that we saw on the internet way back when, 2006, and arguably things haven't gotten as creepy since. It's a classic for a reason, after all. Originally released with the title Possible Fallen Angel in Catalonia, this grainy VCR footage detailed a group of young Spanish folks making their way across a country trail at night and following a very strange trail of feathers. Since its release, paranormal forums and message boards were abuzz with rumours and explanations for the video. Some thought it was a genuine demonic act, an actual fallen angel in Catalonia. Others said it was a chupacabra of Latin American urban legends. Others said it was a straight up ghost and the feathers were just unconnected. But, well, I hate to break it to you guys, this video is a straight up fake and was created and produced by Spanish special effects studio Coco Bongo Artworks. Although others still claim otherwise, they're clinging onto it. Still, it's a pretty damn creepy video, right? Just enjoy it for what it is. Swinging in next at number 2, The Fire Witch. And yeah, not going to lie, this video is pretty damn weird and I don't really know where to begin. So I'll just let you guys see for yourself. Released in 2017, this 30-second clip was taken on a dirt road in the rural Tuxtlas region of southern Mexico. As the video's creators go on to explain, the people behind the camera had chased a supposed witch along the road for several hours, bumping into her on differing strange occasions along the way. As far as the internet can tell, if there are special effects at play, then they're almost too rudimentary for it to be worthwhile. It's difficult to explain away a lens flare of the camera as, well, it's pitch black. Nevertheless, it's an interesting one, and several people have claimed that this is the act of an entity similar to the Bell Witch of South American folklore, who supposedly possesses the ability to shapeshift and materialize at will. Wow, what do you guys think? And finally, at our number 1 spot, something in Oregon. Because when I first saw this video, I knew that it'd be just perfect for you guys, so take a look.
Hyena-ish, but you can hear it going off in the background right now. It's really kind of strange, just to say the least. It's been going off for about 15-20 minutes so far.
Now, I know what you're saying, right? It's just coyotes or something, a pack of them shrieking nearby. But it's important to note that the guy filming this is Native American and he lives on a reserve in Oregon alongside people who know and have a deep understanding of the land that they live on. If it was a coyote, why is he so concerned? Instantly, this guy knows that it's some kind of unknown predator, hence the camera and the concerned expression. Also, I'd just like to say that this guy has balls of steel. You'll see what I mean. Doesn't really sound like coyotes to me. Now, maybe people have alluded to whatever it is being a skinwalker or perhaps a dogman, creatures of Native American folklore that hunt the land in the guise of something else. Fortunately for us, the video ends like this. So, I guess we're safe. Maybe. Who knows?
In at number 5 we have The Resident. This is a true story posted by Redditor McElmary 3 years ago. It all started when their friend moved into a farmhouse. The house had a barn and the barn had a basement. The basement had a set of stairs that led to nowhere. The family moved into the home as it was on the market for less than it should be worth. They saw it as a steal. They later found out that the home's previous owner had taken their own life in the barn. They left behind a letter that read, "Resident told me to." Their friend refused to visit the barn. They were not even curious to walk around its walls. One night their friends thought it would be a good idea to hold a seance. They admit that they were young and rather foolish to think this was a good idea. They set up everything by the instructions they saw online. They had a circle of candles around the group and they all held hands. They were sat next to their friend who lived there during the seance. The group asked if there was someone there and if they can show themselves. Their friend squeezed their hand tighter and tighter. She then turned her head and said to them, "Let's go to the barn. Someone there wants to talk to us." They immediately broke the circle and blew out the candles. They turned on the lights and looked at their friend. The friend fell out of their trance and forgot what happened. To this day they never remembered that night. 1 week after their seance, the friend's dad was found in the barn. He had taken his own life. Beside him was a letter that read, "I'm sorry, I had to listen," as if there was an entity telling him to do that to himself. The Redditor explained maybe it was just a weird coincidence. They did not want to believe what had happened. It does seem there was some dark entity in that barn telling the occupants of the home to do horrible things. Coming in at number 4 we have Ariana Grande. It is not just ordinary people like you and me that have supernatural encounters. Sometimes celebrities can have encounters with demons and otherworldly forces. In 2013, Ariana Grande told Complex about an encounter she had with a demonic spirit. The magazine tried to steer the conversation to music and her personal life, but she insisted on telling the world her story. She admitted that it left her shaken and scared. She won't try to encounter them again. She told them that her incident happened while in Kansas City on her visit to Skull Cemetery. She explained this cemetery is known as one of the 7 gates of hell on Earth. The Pope won't even fly through the airspace above the graveyard due to its dark energy. She was visiting the cemetery with her friends to investigate the claims of its paranormal nature. She said when they entered the area, her and her group of friends could smell sulfur. This is one of the main signs that you are in the presence of a demon. They also noticed a few flies appeared inside of their car. She took this to be the second sign of a demon entity being nearby. She did not let these signs stop her. They entered the cemetery and started to walk around and take pictures. Once they left, they reviewed the pictures that they had taken. Ariana had a photo of a gravestone with 3 distinct faces. She said the faces were textbook demons. She wanted to share this with the world and attempted to send the photo to her manager. When she tried to send the picture, it came up with an error message. "This file can't be sent. It's 666 megabytes." She said after this, weird things started to happen to her. She heard whispers in her home when she was alone. She found no reason for these voices. One night she saw a massive dark cloud above her head. She woke up suddenly and tried to clear the cloud, but when she attempted to touch it, it disappeared. Scared about what might happen next, Ariana deleted the picture. She has vowed to never go back to the cemetery. In at number 3, I was possessed. One Reddit user told the story of how they were possessed. They don't remember any of what happened. They were only a baby when all of this went down. They started off their story by explaining that they were a very calm and quiet baby. When they were 2 years old, it all started on one random night. They were lying in their crib staring upwards, when suddenly they started screaming like crazy. They then started running in circles on their side while screaming. It was not a nightmare as they were awake while it was happening. It was also not seen as a tantrum or them looking for attention, as they were clearly terrified. This continued to happen every night for 6 months. They would behave like this until dawn. When dawn hit, they would go back to sleep as if nothing happened. Their parents took them to many different churches and priests to see if anyone could help. Nothing worked. This went on continuously for 6 months. The family decided to immigrate after the 6 months, meaning they would be moving home. Once they left home, it stopped. It never once happened again. Everyone in the family was aware of what had happened. They chose to never tell them what happened. They lived in fear of the possession taking hold of them again. The family had decided that the less they knew, the better. They thought that if they knew, they would be more vulnerable to it happening again. They were lucky to escape the demon. Hopefully the people who bought the house didn't have the same experience. In at number 2 we have Blue Mountains. One woman told her story of an encounter she had in the Blue Mountains in Australia. She said that she frequently went bushwalking. She would usually go with her dad, but for shorter walks she would go alone. Being a woman walking alone in the woods, she would take knives with her for protection, but she always felt safe going alone. One day she decided she wanted a couple of days of peace and quiet in the mountains by herself. So she decided to take an overnight walk. The walk was fine, she had no issues. She often saw other walkers going in the opposite direction. As it got darker, she picked a little spot just off from the track to set up her tent for the night. As night fell, everything seemed fine and she drifted off to sleep. She was awoken abruptly not long after by what sounded like someone running past her tent on the track, but it went past too fast with too little steps to be be anything human. The force shook her like a train had just passed by the outside of a tent. She felt uneasy but thought it must be a tree falling or something else that would ease her mind even if it didn't really make sense for the appearance she just had. She drifted back off to sleep. The next morning she had her breakfast, packed up her tent and got ready to carry on her walk. She started her walk again. She again passed a few people. After that she was alone for maybe an hour and a half. She then heard a stick breaking from behind her. She said it sounded like it came from behind her on the left, away from the track. When she turned around she was scared to death. She felt a fear like nothing she has ever felt before. A fair distance away in the bushes something was standing there and looking directly at her. She wanted to believe it was a person, but she knew this was nothing human. It was a very tall figure, around 9 feet tall. Its skin was a dark grey colour, its eyes were large and dark, its arms and legs were very long. It did not have a mouth, nose or ears, just large black hole eyes. She had tears rolling down her face, but her feet were frozen in place. She stared at the creature for what felt like a lifetime. She felt filled with dread. The fear kept building until finally she broke her gaze and ran. She ran as fast as she could until she caught up with the other walkers. She broke down as soon as she saw them. They were shocked when they saw her. She was clearly distraught. She told them what happened, but no one could understand the fear she felt or what she saw. She believed she saw a demon. She can't find any other explanation for what she saw. She didn't go walking alone ever again. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Amy Stamatis. Amy Stamatis is a woman from Arkansas who in 2019 was left paralyzed from the waist down after she fell from the secondary story of her home. This might seem like an accident, but this is very different. 7 months before the incident, Amy's life was much different. She lived with her husband and worked as a med-flight nurse at the local medical center. Her last shift at the hospital changed her life. She was on her shift when a burn patient came in for her to treat. She wheeled him in on a stretcher and completed a report on his wounds. The next thing she knew, she was wandering the halls of the emergency room. Aimlessly, she had forgotten how to do her job or why she was there. There were clear blank spots in her memory that she can't recall to this day. She left the hospital to never return. Amy told her husband she felt like she was having a nervous breakdown. She could not make sense of her own mind. She saw a lot of doctors but no one could tell her what was wrong. She then started to hear voices. The voices were telling her to harm herself in different ways. She tried to ignore the voices. The doctors gave her various medications but nothing helped to quiet the voices. Then one day the voices told her to climb out of her second-story window. She was sitting there when she was pushed. She is adamant that she did not jump. She felt the voices as a force pushed her from the window. After her fall, she was lying in the hospital when she was visited by a woman. This woman had previously claimed to have healed many terminally ill patients, as well as successfully conducting many exorcisms. The woman saw something in Amy that no one else had. She said that she could see the demons in that room with Amy. She could also hear the same voices that were talking to her for all those months. Amy had not met this woman before or asked her to come. The woman claimed she simply felt compelled to visit her. The woman prayed over Amy and brought anointing oil to wipe over her forehead. She cast out the demons. Amy's friend said she looked different after that, like her brain had cleared and she was back to her old self. She never heard the voices again. It's unknown where this demon came from or where it went. It seems to have transferred from the burned patient to Amy. It seemed to be a pattern of the demon making its victim hurt itself before transferring onto the next. Hopefully it was cast out for good. Amy remained positive about having her life back, happy she was able to survive the demon.
Number 5 on this list is the pyramids. The Great Pyramids are located in Egypt and are some of the oldest structures on the entire planet. The pyramids are said to have been constructed over 4,500 years ago and were made to act as the burial grounds for the pharaohs of Egypt. The Great Pyramid, which is the biggest of all of them, is over 450 feet tall with a base of over 750 feet wide. That's a really big structure and acted as the largest structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. It should also be noted that the pyramids are made up of massive stone blocks. For the Great Pyramid, it's estimated that 2.3 million stone blocks are what keep it standing to this day. Every block of the Great Pyramid also weighs approximately 2.5 to 15 tons. Just a reminder that a ton is 2,000 pounds, so there were some blocks that could have weighed close to 30,000 pounds. All of this is completely unbelievable. So unbelievable, in fact, that people think something else might have been at play in making them. It's currently believed that these were made by humans. It took thousands of humans to construct, but when you think about how monstrous these creations are and the technology that humans had back in that day, it becomes very hard to believe that we were capable of doing that. This has led people to the theory of aliens. These pyramids are also built to face the precise magnetic north, which makes people wonder how the ancient Egyptians could have possibly got that information. The theory is that these aliens came down and built the pyramids and the ancient Egyptians mistook them for gods. This is why in some ancient Egyptian drawings we see gods flying around. The Daily Star also reports the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second, and the geographic coordinates for the Great Pyramid coincide with that if you just move the decimal points over several spaces. They believe that this was a clue from the aliens for us to discover later. Frankly, as cool as aliens are, I would honestly rather believe that humans made the pyramids. It's pretty cool to know that almost 5,000 years ago, our species was able to make something like that. I feel like I have a little bit of pride for those ancient Egyptians. Number 4 on this list is the Bermuda Triangle. You've obviously heard about the Bermuda Triangle before and the lore that accompanies this extremely mysterious place. If you don't know what it is though, then the History Channel classifies it as a mythical section of the Atlantic Ocean roughly bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where dozens of ships and airplanes have disappeared. These disappearances have continued to this day, but started hundreds of years ago. Basically since people started crossing over the Atlantic Ocean and records of ships were being kept. In fact, it's believed that William Shakespeare's The Tempest was based on a real shipwreck that happened at the Bermuda Triangle. So legends of this place can at least be dated back to when he wrote that play, which was in the early 1600s. In 1918, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle reached an all-time high when the USS Cyclops, a massive ship from the United States, sank to the bottom of the ocean. This ship was over 500 feet long and had over 300 people on board. It was a horrible catastrophe when it happened. What made this even more stupefying was that the ship had the capability to send out a distress signal and didn't do so, making everyone wonder what on earth happened. What has caused all these shipwrecks and plane crashes over the years is still unknown, but there are some theories. Some people believe that the Bermuda Triangle is home to a massive sea monster, potentially the Kraken or something like that. A massive tentacled monster with the ability to drag a ship down to the depths of the ocean and eat all who are on board. Some people believe that there may even be a wormhole that is out there in the middle of the ocean. A wormhole is a ripple through space-time which experts believe would act as a portal to another time and dimension. The Bermuda Triangle has also been called the Devil's Triangle before, indicating that some people believe this place could be the work of the devil or some strong sea demons out there. Nobody really knows the true cause of the Bermuda Triangle, and considering it's been talked about for hundreds of years, we may never know. Number 3 on this list is Stonehenge. Stonehenge is very similar to the pyramids, having been built roughly 5,000 years ago and being so difficult to construct that people think some sort of paranormal events must have transpired. Located in Wiltshire, England, Stonehenge is a monument that features massive stones standing vertically that weigh roughly 25 tons. That's 50,000 pounds of weight that these monstrous stones have to them. The monument is oriented towards the sunrise on the summer solstice, but other than that, not a lot of people know why it's there or what its purpose was. Now it is owned by the Crown and considered a heritage site, but still people wonder, why was it put there in the first place? Some theories involve its effect on sound waves. When two people are playing a pipe and you walk around the stones, then you'll notice an effect where they cancel each other out. Some people have even chalked it up as being an ancient sex symbol, believe it or not. However, the most popular theory is similar to the pyramids in believing that it's aliens. I tend to believe aliens were capable of this more than the periods, to be honest. They are certainly arranged in a strange fashion and they have no set purpose. How is it possible for humans to lug stones that are 50,000 pounds to a location where there aren't that many stones to begin with? Stonehenge just screams like the sort of place where something paranormal happened, in my opinion. Number 2 on this list is Jesus. I feel like this wouldn't be a complete list if I didn't include one of the most mysterious events that occurred in all of history. Jesus lived 2,000 years ago during a tumultuous time. His life was one that we all remember and has inspired millions of people since he passed. His death is where something paranormal may have taken place though. Jesus died by crucifixion at the hands of the Romans. This was ordered by the governor Pilate, who felt the pressures from the Roman people and felt like he had to give in to them. The crucifixion process lasted for over 6 hours apparently, until Jesus finally gave his last breath. After he died, he was taken to his tomb, which was closed off and shut by a massive stone. This tomb was guarded by several officers for days, until on the third day it said that the rock moved and Jesus ascended from that tomb to heaven. His body was no longer in the tomb on this day, and the belief that he went to heaven spread throughout the land. Now, a question a lot of people ask is, how do we know for sure that his body was gone and that tomb was actually empty? Now, we know that because after he was gone and his followers were claiming he was resurrected, then the best way for the Romans to stop that theory would have been to produce the body, which they were never capable of doing. So where did it go? Well, it's widely believed that Jesus ascended to heaven, that God acted and brought his son home to him. Maybe this event is less of a paranormal event and more of a miracle, but I still wanted to include it in this video. Number 1 on this list is the Dropa stones. The legends of the Dropa stones is a little bit up in the air, but if it is true, then there is certainly something paranormal afoot. The Dropa stones are a collection of 716 circular discs that are said to be over 12,000 years old. They have very strange markings on them in a language that hardly anyone is familiar with. These stones were apparently discovered by Chu Pei Te, a Chinese archaeologist in the 1930s who found them inside some abandoned caves. They made their way to a translator who was able to decipher some of the markings and learn that they were referring to humans and aliens. So the theory is that aliens were present 12,000 years ago and had some serious interactions with humans back then. Now, there are a few reasons why we can't take this as being full fact. One, it's possible that the translator who was in charge of deciphering them is wrong. We can't say for sure that they're familiar with the intricacies of language 12,000 years ago. Number 2 is that today, nobody knows where these stones have gone. They aren't in a museum and their location is unknown. And this is really hard to believe considering there are 716 of them and they would have been one of the biggest archaeological finds in years. All of this being said though, if these stones are real and our translator was correct, then that is undeniable proof of an alien presence from 12,000 years ago, which is pretty cool to think about.
Kicking off at number 5, William Seabrook. Born William Beulah Seabrook on February 22nd, 1884 in Westminster, Maryland, this guy led a pretty interesting life to say the least. Occultist, explorer, world traveler, and even cannibal. William Seabrook cemented himself as a renowned figure of paranormal intrigue, claiming that his thirst for the supernatural was inspired by his grandmother, Piney, an opium addict, child of nature, and a witch. Seabrook established himself as a renegade journalist, traveling the globe and experiencing the spiritual cultures of far-flung worlds. It was in Haiti though that Seabrook gained such recognition in the world of the occult and pursuit of the paranormal. While researching his book The Magic Island, which is also largely responsible for introducing the word zombie into the English lexicon, Seabrook developed a fascination with Haitian voodoo and communing with spirits, which would later become his life's work. Also, The Magic Island directly inspired the 1932 film White Zombie by Victor Halperin, which is widely considered to be the first ever zombie movie and the birth of the zombie genre. Cheers, buddy. Coming in at number 4, Carlis Osis, which is a great name, right? Rolls straight off the tongue. Born on the 26th of December 1917 in Riga, Latvia, Carlis Osis is perhaps one of the most notable psychologists to dive deep into the rabbit hole of ESP research, or extrasensory perception. Second sight, visions, precognition, communing with the dead. Whatever you want to call it, Carlis Osis laid the foundation of what was then known as deathbed visions. First studied by British physicist and founder of the Society for Psychical Research, William Fletcher Barrett. Laid out in his book At the Hour of Death, Carlis Osis spent his life examining life after death scenarios alongside the possibility of using this study to communicate with the dead. Alongside his fellow parapsychologist Erlander Haraldsson, Osis conducted his most important research between 1959 and 1973, when his research paper was finally published by the American Society for Psychical Research, in which the pair claimed that deathbed visions occurred in over 50% 3% of the studied population. Carlos Osis lived to the ripe age of 80, and up until 1997 he was the president of the Parapsychological Association, investigating numerous claims of ghost and poltergeist activity across the United States. Next up at number 3, Frederick Bligh Bond. Born on the 30th of June 1864 in Marlborough, Wiltshire, Frederick Bligh was actually a renowned architect, illustrator and archaeologist before he was a psychic researcher. Throughout his career as an architect, no one was really aware that Bligh was deeply invested into the world of spiritualism and the investigation of the paranormal that was emerging throughout the early 1900s, and would regularly attend seances and visit mediums in an effort to communicate with ghosts. It wasn't until 1907, when he was hired to manage excavations in and around Glastonbury Abbey, that his true motivations began to manifest. Unknown to his employers, Frederick Bligh was convinced that Glastonbury Abbey, an Anglo-Saxon Benedictine monastery from the 7th century, had been built according to the specifications of sacred geometry, and therefore provided a ley line for communication with the dead. Well, his employers didn't like that thought, and he lost his job. But Frederick Bligh Bond spent the rest of his life dedicated to paranormal research, becoming a member of the American Society for Psychical Research and exploring the realm of psychic archaeology. Swinging in at number 2, Montague Summers. And a man who led a very intriguing life, to say the least. Born on the 10th of April 1880 in Clifton, Bristol, Augustus Montague Summers was essentially a self-styled medieval witch hunter and vampirologist dedicated to chronicling the dark forces and supernatural occurrences of the Western world. Oh, and also he was a priest. Let's not beat around the bush. Old Montague Summers was a pretty eccentric dude, and he was criticised and mocked by many of his contemporaries for his proficiency to dress in a black cassock and cloak, buckled shoes and shovel hat, parading himself around 1920s England, clutching tomes on vampirism. However, the reason that he makes this list is for his decision to translate the 15th century witch hunter's manual, Malleus Maleficarum, also known as the Hammer of Witches, into English in 1928. He spent the entirety of his life producing works of literature such as witchcraft and black magic, the werewolf in lore and legend, and the vampire, his kith and kin, which greatly helped to lend credence to the idea that folk legends, paranormal investigation and the practice of the supernatural were worthy of academic study. And finally, our number 1 spot, Harry Price. A guy that was just as likely to punch a ghost in the face as he would a fraudulent spiritual medium. Harry Price was the living equivalent of Harry Dresden without the magic. Born in London in 1881, he was a ghost hunter extraordinaire, making a career out of exposing fake psychics and spiritualist mediums that were sweeping across the Western world at the time. Yet his all-consuming passion and life work was the investigation of paranormal phenomena, and he approached it with great capability while debunking the fraudulent around him. His first major case came in 1922 when he exposed the spirit photographer William Hope as a fraud, and later would expose the likes of Eileen J. Garrett, Frederick Munnings, Frank Decker and Rudy Schneider, all of which proved to add credence and credibility to his own paranormal investigations. The most famous being his publicised investigation of the Borley Rectory in Essex, which at the time was considered the most haunted building in England. Still to this day, Harry Price is considered one of the most valuable and genuine researchers of paranormal occurrences throughout the modern age.
Number 5 on this list is Saint Dunstan. Saint Dunstan was an archbishop who had a lot of encounters with the devil. A clerk of Oxford says, one day as evening was coming, an old man appeared at his window and asked him to make a chalice for him. Setting aside what he was working on, Dunstan agreed to the request and set to work. But as he was working, his visitor began to change shape. One moment he was an old man, then a young boy, then a seductive woman. Dunstan realized that his guest was the devil, but pretending not to notice, he went on with his task. He took up the tongs from among his tools and laid them in the fire, waiting until they were red hot. Then, pulling them out of the fire, he turned round and seized the devil by the nose with the tongs. The devil struggled and screamed, but Dunstan held on until at last he felt he had triumphed. Then he threw the devil out of his cell and it fled, running down the street and crying, "Woe is me, what has that bald devil done to me? Look at me, a poor wretch, look how he has tortured me." Many people heard and saw this, and the following day they came to Dunstan and asked what had happened. He said to them, "These are the tricks of devils who try to trap us with their snares whenever they can. But if we remain firm in the service of Christ, we can easily defeat them with his help, and they will flee from us in confusion." That wasn't the only encounter that St. Dunstan had with the devil. In fact, he became known for having run-ins with Satan quite frequently. Several times, Dunstan swore that the devil himself came as an animal. One day, he appeared as a wolf and then changed into a fox right before his eyes. He tried to make St. Dunstan stop performing his prayers, but St. Dunstan's focus would not be broken, and eventually Satan gave up. These stories were told all across the land and are still told today to try and enlighten people about how Satan could attack you. He doesn't always appear as the red-horned evil beast that he's often portrayed as. Oftentimes, he could show himself as an innocent little fox, and we need to be ready if he does. Number 4 on this list is Houska Castle. Houska Castle might be the literal entrance to hell, guys, meaning that Satan has been chilling here for quite some time. All That's Interesting says, as Bohemian chronicler Václav Hašek detailed in his Czech Chronicle in 1541, the first known structure at the site was a small wooden fort in the 9th century. Hašek also recounted local folklore that described the emergence of a crack in the cliff. It revealed a seemingly endless abyss that villagers deemed an entrance to hell. Locals were terrified of the half-human hybrids that began to crawl out of the hole at night and tear livestock apart. Fearful of turning into these demonic entities themselves, villagers avoided the rocky entrance. They tried to block it with stones, but the abyss allegedly gobbled up anything they dropped into it, refusing to be filled. King Ottokar II of Bohemia had the Gothic structure built sometime between 1253 and 1278. Oddly, the original construction of the castle omitted stairs from the courtyard to the upper floors, and most of the structure's defenses were built facing inwards. It was as if the purpose of the castle wasn't to keep invaders out, but rather to keep something trapped within. Over the years, there have been tons of encounters with Satan here and his minions. I mean, they literally built an entire castle to try and stop them from coming. That's how bad it got. This might be some of the clearest proof I've seen, and maybe the best entry on this list when it comes to convincing me. Building a castle would have cost a lot of money. When big sums of money start getting thrown around, that's when I start thinking that this could be legit. Number 3 on this list is Father Gabriel Amorth. This man was one of the most prolific exorcists ever, and he came face to face with Satan. The NY Post says, in 1997, when a young slim peasant man was escorted into the small room where Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, the priest felt immediately confronted by evil. Amorth said he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man began to curse and spit, using English instead of his native Italian. His curses and threats were aimed solely at the exorcist. Then he began spitting at him and preparing to attack him physically, writes Marcello Stanizone in The Devil is Afraid of Me, the life and work of the world's most famous exorcist. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Amorth said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. "Unclean spirit," Amorth bellowed. "Whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare and snarled, "I am Lucifer." Literally, the father was face to face with Satan right there. He went on to perform one of the most harrowing exorcisms of his life, one that lasted weeks. Eventually, he was able to rid the person of this devil and let the young man go on with his life. But wow. I'm no exorcist, so I don't know what it's like, but I imagine that they have nightmares of having an exorcism go like that, where the person reveals themselves as Satan. Father Gabriel Amorth was the best of the best, though, and managed to win that fight. Number 2 on this list is Will Carroll. Will Carroll is a drummer from the heavy metal band Death Angel. Seems like a fitting name for the band considering what happened to Will. Global News says after spending nearly 2 weeks in a coma fighting COVID-19, Death Angel drummer Will Carroll has revealed that during his battle with the virus, he had bizarre dreams of the afterlife, where he would be sent to hell and meet Satan. Carroll tested positive for the novel coronavirus shortly after the conclusion of Death Angel's most recent European tour. The illness left him in a critical state where he was put on a ventilator while lying unconscious in a California Pacific Medical Center hospital bed for 12 days before recovering. In an exclusive interview with the San Francisco Chronicle published on May 15th, just days after the musician's 47th birthday, Carroll revealed that in his dreams, the devil would punish him for the deadly sin of sloth. The musician said Satan would transform him into a creature similar to that of Star Wars' Jabba the Hutt, and that he would vomit blood until he ultimately had a heart attack. Well, that sounds like literally the worst time ever. My dude got put in a coma from COVID, and then Satan came to him and turned him into a slug and made him cough blood. Obviously not the best time there for my man Will. He was absolutely convinced that this happened to him though, that it wasn't just all in his head, but Satan really did do that. And even though his body was lying in a hospital bed, he was still going through all of it. Finally, number 1 on this list is George Lukens. George Lukens was a young man that was living in England. On May 31st of 1778, he started to experience some pretty unusual symptoms and didn't feel too good. He went to the doctor and they tried a few things. However, nothing was working, and by all accounts, it looked as if George was getting worse. He was having serious convulsions, and getting through his everyday life was becoming increasingly difficult. After trying the doctor for a while with no success, he turned to the church. It became clear to the priest he approached that George was infested with some type of strong and powerful demon, and that they would need to perform an exorcism. This wasn't an everyday ordinary exorcism though. The priest could sense a strong power here and needed help. He called in 6 other priests to perform a super powerful exorcism and get this demon out for good. Well, turns out this was a good idea because the demon was Satan. During the exorcism, George started bending the laws of physics and floating in the air. A voice that wasn't his started echoing around the room claiming that he was Satan, and everyone in the room was going to hell. After several hours of fighting back and forth with the devil, eventually the priests won and rid George of him. George actually went on to live a healthy life after that, and his illness was cured.